Hey friends, I'm Renee with the Flippin' Tilbies, and today I'm going to be talking about how to remove cracked graphics from an RV. I did a similar video a few years ago talking about all of the different products that I use to try to remove the cracked graphics from the renovation RV that we are working on at the time. I said that I would do a follow-up video talking about how I removed the graphic ghosting from the filon material, but because we ended up having such a trial and error to do that on that project, I ended up not recording it. So this video is going to be the entire process, how I removed the cracked graphics, how I removed the ghosting from the graphics that have imprinted onto the filon, and I'm also going to talk about the last step, which is buffing out all the filon to really make it shine and look beautiful. So to all the people who've been waiting for a follow-up video for 2+ years, I'm really sorry, but here it finally is. First off, I do want to say that if your graphics are not cracked and you want to remove them, the easiest way to do this is with a hair dryer or a heat gun. Just warm those up, get a plastic razor blade, peel up the edge, and then gently pull it back as you're heating that graphic. This really is the best way and the fastest way of removing any graphics that are not cracked. But if your graphics are really old and they're starting to crack and looking like the desert floor, this technique is not going to work for you. You're just going to get teeny little pieces of the graphic off, and it's going to take you forever. We've also tried using a rubber wheel to remove the graphics. This did not work for us either. A lot of people do say that they like this method, but for us, it actually just worked the aged graphic into the filon, creating a muddy, gross mess. So if you like this way, go ahead and use it, but for us, it did not work, especially on these older, sun-aged graphics. So the products that we're going to use for the first step, which is the removal of the graphics, is this GraphXoff remover. And I just bought the 6 fluid ounces. We used this size for the previous RV that we worked on, and we actually didn't even use the entire bottle. A little bit of this goes a very long way. We also got a bristle brush. I just ordered this on the same website that I got the GraphXoff, but it is just a cheap paintbrush that you can get anywhere. And then you're also going to need a plastic razor blade. And I actually ordered this one on the website as well. This is going to allow you to get in there cleanly without damaging your filon. If you try using something metal, this is most likely going to scratch into your filon material and dent it. I do want to state that the GraphXoff material is not good if you're trying to remove graphics from a metal material. This is actually going to take your paint and everything off as well. This is only for graphics that are on a filon fiberglass material and not for an aluminum sided RV. Also, if you are using this on a filon RV but some of your trim pieces are metal, don't use the GraphXoff because it will start to pull the paint off of that. So before you start this project, be aware of which parts of your RV are metal and which part are that filon fiberglass material, and only use it on the filon fiberglass. But for those areas, it works amazing. Nothing else that we've tried works as good as this. We're also going to use an old cup or container to put the GraphXoff material in. I also do have gloves to protect my hands. You do not want to get this stuff on your skin, and I am wearing a long sleeve shirt also to protect my skin. And then even though this product says that it's biodegradable, I do not like putting it on the ground. So I do have a bowl to put all the scraped material off. One, to make it so that I don't make as much of a mess, and I also don't really know what's in this product and I don't want it going into the groundwater. The steps we'll be covering to remove the graphics from this motorhome is we're going to use the paintbrush, we're going to paint that on to the graphics, and we're gonna let it sit. The hotter the ambient temperature is, the faster this is going to work, but also the faster that the material will get dry. So the cooler it is and the less sunny it is, the more area you can paint on before going back and peeling it up. Today the temperature is high 50s, low 60s. It's sunny out, but most of the areas I'm gonna be working in are in the shade, so I will probably be able to do a larger amount of area, paint it on, let it sit for a few minutes, and then come back. The product says you can let it sit for up to half an hour, but when I was doing it last time and it was in the 70s, you do not want to wait that long. It will be completely dry by the time you come back and you will have to reactivate it all. But since today is a more moderate temperature, I'll probably wait maybe 15 minutes before I come back and start peeling off the material. After we've painted on the GraphXoff, we're going to let it sit for a little bit, come back with our razor blade, start scraping it off, and then try to get as much of that material into our bowl so that we're not leaving a huge mess. The GraphXoff does a really great job of getting most of the material off, but sometimes you do have to go back over, paint a second coat of the GraphXoff to remove the remainder of your vinyl graphics. So let's get moving on to that step.
I have
have applied the GraphXoff remover to the entire front of this RV, but this RV does have a thicker vinyl on the front of it to protect it from bugs and things like that, and it is taking quite a bit more time to break that down to remove it than it usually does with the typical vinyl graphics. I've been letting this sit for about 40 minutes, and I have been using a heat gun to remove the graphics from the side of the RV that are not cracked. And every few minutes I've come back and checked with my plastic razor blade to see if it softened the vinyl graphics. I did switch over to this style of a plastic razor blade because it's able to get in there a little bit deeper and give me a little bit more leverage, especially on this thicker vinyl that we're working with right now. It took us about 3 afternoons to remove all of the vinyl graphics from the motorhome. The reason it took so long was because the entire front of the motorhome is covered with a extra thick clear plastic vinyl sticker that's called a clear bra. This protects the front of the motorhome from any debris, bugs, and things like that as it's going down the road. And I was not anticipating this being so hard to remove, nor it taking so much product to remove. So we did end up having to buy a second bottle of the GraphXoff remover in order to get all of that off and the rest of the vinyl from the motorhome off as well. So we did need 2 full bottles of the GraphXoff remover, the 16-ounce size, to remove all the graphics from this motorhome. When we removed the graphics from the fifth wheel a few years ago, I tried a lot of removers to take off the adhesive underneath the vinyl, and we ended up using a powdered TSP paint prep to remove all the adhesive from the filon of that fifth wheel. But I wanted to find something that worked a little bit better, that was fairly tedious, and I don't think it was the right product to use. On this project, we tried a few more products, and we ended up finding this rapid remover. This works so much better than anything else we've ever used. We're able to spray that on and it's removing really nicely. So a few tips for removing the graphics is you only want to use the GraphXoff product on the filon material. Do not use this on any painted metal on your RV. Some of the areas that you want to be sure that you're keeping an eye out for are the trim pieces around your slide outs. Those are pretty much always metal that's painted, not filon. You also want to watch out for any brackets, things like that. Those are typically painted metal. And then also your awning supports. Those are going to be painted metal as well. If you get the GraphXoff on those, it's going to quickly remove the paint from those, and it's going to be a pain to fix those spots. So mask those off and be sure to not get it on any painted metal, only your filon material. Another tip is have multiple types of plastic scrapers. So we use this one and we used this one. This one I like to get more into the details, and this one was better for larger areas. I also made sure that I was keeping these fairly sharp. We used a belt sander and an orbital sander to periodically sharpen these and keep them sharp to really get in there and get the vinyl off easily. If you have dull and chipped scrapers, you are going to be working way harder to get them off, and you're also at risk of damaging your filon material. So have multiple types of scrapers, keep them nice and sharpened, and do not gouge that filon. That's very difficult to buff out. Another tip is once you've put the GraphXoff onto that vinyl and you've let it sit for the 15-20 minutes and it's still not loosening, just go ahead and put a second layer on top of there. You'll waste so much time and energy trying to scrape off the vinyl that's not fully loosened. So go ahead and buy 2 bottles, put the product on nice and heavily, let it sit on there, test it. Only start scraping once it's fully loosened, or else you're going to be killing your arms and wasting a lot of time and energy. The bottles are only 20 bucks, buy extra, use a lot of product, save yourself that time. Another tip is get a good audiobook, because this step of removing the vinyl graphics is very tedious. You're going to want something to keep you entertained while you're doing this whole project. Another thing you want to be aware of is that different colors of the vinyl graphics do respond to the GraphXoff remover differently. This is probably due to the fact that different colored graphics wear differently in the sun. Darker graphics tend to bake quicker and bake into your filon deeper and will need more layers of the GraphXoff product in order to remove it. A lot of times the lighter colored graphics are a lot easier to remove. So just to be aware that just because it's working one way on one color, it's probably going to do something completely different on a different color. And the last tip for using the GraphXoff material is first test it in an inconspicuous area. Use this product at your own risk and be smart with how you use it. Make sure you wear gloves. It is fairly caustic and you do not want it touching your skin. Now that we've removed all of the vinyl graphics from this motorhome, it is time to move on to removing the sticky adhesive residue left over. How we're going to do that is we're going to use the rapid remover spray. We're going to spray it on, let it sit for a minute or 2. We're going to test it to see if it's removing easily with one of our plastic scrapers, and then we're going to scrape all of the adhesive that we can off with the plastic scraper. After that, we will spray a Scotch-Brite pad with a little bit of the adhesive remover, and we will scrub off the remaining sticky residue. After that step, we will get a wet cloth, wipe off the rest of the rapid remover, and see if there's any remaining spots of the adhesive. Now that I've removed all the graphics, all of the adhesive left over underneath it, and really cleaned up the surface, and given my arms a few days to rest, I'm now moving on to wet sanding the entire filon surface. I'm doing this for a few reasons. One, because when the graphics were sitting on the filon for so long and they started getting micro cracks, some of them actually adhered into the top coat of the filon, and I want to remove those. I also want to remove any ghosting and discoloration left over from those graphics sitting on there for so long. The surface underneath the graphics is also going to be quite a bit shinier than the surface of the rest of the rig because it's been protected. So when I'm sanding everything down, I'm also bringing them all to the same sheen down with like a 400, and then I'll bring it back up, and then I'm going to wax afterwards. So I'm going to use a 400 just over the surfaces that the graphics were covering and this area around it to kind of blend it in. I'm also going to use that 400 on any area I'm going to paint later. The entire lower section of this RV is a painted surface, and I could tell the difference from that from the graphics because it was flaking off instead of cracking and peeling up where the graphics were. So anywhere that was painted before, a lot of times you can just buff it out and bring up the shine again and it'll look beautiful. But this rig was so old and been baking for so long that a lot of the paint had been flaking off, and so we obviously need to repaint or do something to bring that back to life. So I'm using a 400 on any area that I'm planning on painting, and I'm using a 400 on any area that was covered with the graphics to be able to reduce any discoloration, any ghosting, and any micro cracks. I'm going to do a wet sand process, so I'm going to use a hose with a little spray nozzle on it. I have done this just with a spray bottle as well, but that's pretty tedious. It does work a lot better using a hose with a nozzle. So I'm going to spray the entire area down. I'll have the spray bottle handy in case I do need a little bit of spot water while I'm up there on the ladder. And then I'm going to wet sand the entire area, get the hose, spray it off, and then spray the next section that I plan on sanding. I'm going to do this the entire side in the 400 grit. Then I'm going to move up to an 800 grit over the entire area, so not just the areas where the graphics are. And then I'm going to finish off with 1,000 and possibly a 1,500 depending upon how it looks. After that entire process is finished, I will wax the entire thing with a waxing compound. I am not going to use the higher grit sandpapers on the areas I plan on painting. If I do, then the primer is going to have a really hard time gripping to that. So I'm going to stay at the 400 on the lower section, and then I am going to buff all the way up to the 1,000 or 1,500 on the upper section. So let's get going on that step. After I finished wet sanding the entire exterior of the RV, I did move on to buffing. I used a Meguiar's all-in-one, and I did use an electrical buffer to buff the entire rig. Now, a lot of times if you haven't had any of the burning into the filon, you can probably get away with just removing your graphics and then buffing it out with an all-in-one or a wax to be able to bring back a new life to the exterior of your rig. I did choose to do the wet sanding step because my graphics had burnt into the filon and created a lot of micro cracks. So I wanted to get that wet sanding to be able to create a really beautiful surface and to get rid of as much ghosting as I possibly could. So after I buffed the entire thing, it looks beautiful and it looks new. I did want to note that we did end up painting the entire lower section of this rig because the paint job was cracking. So we did sand that entire lower section down to a 400 grit, and then we did a primer, and then we finished it off with an automotive paint. But that is absolutely not necessary if you're just trying to give a little bit of new life to your rig. You can just remove the graphics, wet sand it, and and then buff it out with a wax or an all-in-one. But I'm telling you, you really can take a old, tired looking exterior RV and give it new life and make it be something beautiful again. It's so satisfying to give new life to old things. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope these tips I shared with you today were helpful. We really appreciate any likes and subscribes so that we can continue giving you guys quality content like this to help you with your own projects and RV renovations. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and happy RVing.